Fitting electric windows in the T5 seems to be easier than any other vehicle that I've ever done. It's almost as if they wanted you to be able to upgrade or build it better on the production line. So let's have a look at the kit that I've got. I got this from Euro Car Parts sometime last year, but I'll leave links in the description below of similar looking kits. And at the end of the video, I will give you an old school tip on to keep your electric windows running so much smoother, particularly in slightly older models like this. Inside the box, got 2 motors, wiring loom, OEM looking switches, some grommets, little plugs to fill up the holes, and instructions. So like most of you, just open up that kit that you've ordered, hopefully using the link below, because you've done your research beforehand. You've been presented with all these wires and a diagram, and you're thinking, I can't do that. I can assure you it's a little bit easier than you expect. So first thing we'll do, we'll take the door pad off. Now I have actually got this panel off because I've been fitting front fog lights to the van, and the screws are fairly self-explanatory. So I'll run through at the end of the video putting it back together, if that sounds easier, but we'll do the door first. Let's say goodbye to this handle. So all you need to do is push it up, makes a little click, and that comes off. So it appears that all the screws are a T25 star. I think this has been off before, that wasn't very tight. And that looks like it comes upwards. Let's see if we can just get a little tool. No, you can do it without a tool. Up and out. And there's 2 more screws there. Right, we've got a couple of cross heads in there. I've got these trim removal tools, which are quite handy, quite a sturdy plastic. Just be wary of the really cheap ones because they're really flimsy. You can't really get any grip behind them. So just knock that up. And then just knock it upwards because it needs to come off the seal off the top. Unclip itself and then a hook. So we just look at what it is. So you need to unclip. You need to unclip that bit to allow it to move that way. And there we can see the actual winding mechanism, which looks dead simple. What we need to do in the kit is actually undo these. So this is why I said it's really easy, whereas this is a complete unit, probably very similar to how it was on factory, that just bolts in. And it's actually right side, so there's the right side, so there is the room that this motor is going to sit in. So it would probably fit almost any other way, but you're going to knock against the door panel, so we'll fit that in like that. If you take a closer look, it's almost like on manufacture these door pads are just being cut, so that goes in like that, and then this screws on behind it. So I've made a template and then transferred it onto the top layer. So I've just gone a little bit ahead of where that mechanism is, tried to get the lines parallel. Now my first set of lines I felt was a little bit too much onto the edge of this groove, and what might happen is, because it's got a bit of an overlap, it will look odd if it's overhanging a little bit. So I've just moved my lines a little bit over. So next I'm going to drill this. I'm going to put 4 holes in. And then a Stanley knife just to join them up. We can see what we're actually doing now and just square that up nicely now. A bit of space for these tabs. Your kit might be a little bit different, but just watch out for stuff like this. So I've just had to extend it a little bit more on that way for it to sit quite snugly. And this has got quite a good design because it's a little bit curved. That sits in nicely. I'm going to keep that off because I'm going to put all the wiring through. Doesn't look very simple, but looking at it, it's actually simpler than you think. So I'll run through it on here, but there's 2 sets of diagrams. So we've got that side with 3 switches, which is applicable to this vehicle because it's a 2-door model with 3 switches. And the other side that looks very similar, apart from it's got 2 switches, seem to be both on one side, as if you didn't have a passenger one. Well, someone must want to fit it that way. Anyway, let's run through these. Got that to a nice even level. I'm just going to put a little bit of tape every so often just to keep it together. We don't want to tape it all the way up because I find that's where problems will arise from, particularly when you try and move it around there if it's too tightly bound, because that just gives it a little bit more flexibility. So I've taped up just that section because that's going to be the side that sits in between the weather and through that strip. Just nipped it underneath where this wiring comes through, and I've run the wiring down, so if any water does hit it, instead of seeping in, there's a little bit of what we call a drip loop. So a drip loop, pretty much like that, and the water will hit it instead of going into the grommet as if it was just like that and dripping down, which would be inside. On the other side of there, it just loops down, so any water is going to drip off the bottom of it rather than seep in. Plus I've done it just underneath there to help protect it as well. So there is some logic. The door card back, and make sure we run all the wires through here because we shouldn't need to access this anymore. We're going to put this cable back on. So the main thing is it's hooked through, slotted in, and that is secure, so this will not come off, and that what acts against the stop. And you plug in the little LED. Now on mine, which is going to happen on yours, these little tabs are going to stay stuck in, which aren't going to hold the door card in. So we're just going to give them a little bit of a pull. They only move back like 1/2 centimetre, and then they come out. So they just sit in like that. So with all the wires there, it's essentially set up to be quite easy, that all you've got to do is apply power and earth. Now it's from this point, that's the only power you need. It is advising to put a relay in there, but I think I'm going to hook it up to one of the other relays and put a fuse in there. So first off is doing the earth. So there's a nice little earth point here because this framework is actually bolted to the chassis, and that is a really good earth point. It's not the same as going direct to the chassis, but I'm very happy with that one. Just got to be careful because something like this only draws about 10 amps. I've gone up to the fuse board here and pulled out the one that's marked 100. So that is a ignition live relayed. So that's basically terminal 15. So I'm going to solder a feed onto there that's going to feed my fuse. So with that soldered up and taped up, I can pop that, which is the relay carrier, back into the top. Wow. Now I've got that connected to a switch live via the ignition, which is one of the factory relays. I thought I had one of these little fuse holders, so that's part of the alarm system. But yeah, these little fuse holders that basically takes one of these connectors. But because I haven't got one of these, I'm going to do the next best thing. One of these little crimps, which is basically one of these spade connectors, just insulated. I'm going to put the fuse directly into that. Some say might not be best practice, which is a bit of a temporary measure till I find the actual packet of fuse holders, or I actually go and get another one. So for now I'm going to put in a 25 amp fuse, which is what's recommended by the instructions. So if I put it in like that, we can, it's really hard for you to see, but that's just, that can go all the way in, and you can see how it sits flush. So there's a couple of ways to crimp these properly. So you can either crimp them sideways, just push them down with a set of pliers. There's a set of tools which you'd crimp it in the middle, which is quite adequate, but you've got to remember to do it in 2 places. So you've got to do it at the end, which holds the plastic insulation to the plastic, and then also crimp the metal bit. So I've got these old faithful wire crimpers which work perfectly. They go in one way and do a really tidy job. So put that in the red section, line it up. I've just had these for years and they work perfectly, so I'll leave a link in the description below if you're looking for a similar sort of set. So I'm not going to put a fuse in just yet until I've passed all the wires through the other side and we're ready to connect up the switches. So what I'm going to do next, because these 3 wires are the ones that get fed over the other side, so I know 3 wires doesn't make sense, but the way that the switches work makes perfect sense, because 2 are permanently earthed, 1 is permanently lived. When you operate this side, that sends a live to one of these earth ones, which then go through the switch. Quite complicated, makes perfect sense when you draw it down on a diagram. Just trust that it works. Right, I've managed to install the motor into there and run the wiring through there. Just a little bit harder because I've obviously got it up against a wall, but I've not marked any of the paintwork. So I've already connected the little extension piece that comes in. So this is my favourite bit, the wiring it all up. And I've re-looked at the instructions and I've worked out why on one side you've got 2 switches, because if you had a car like a Mk1 Golf, for example, you'd have 2 switches in the centre console and you operate it from there, whereas this one has got 2 switches on one side and 1 switch on the other side, so it makes it more like a modern car. So I put the fuse in there now. So first off, this little extension piece. So this little extension piece has got 2 different sizes, big ones and little ones. So the little ones go onto the end of the motor, which I've got up here. So that's the end of the motor. I'm going to do blue to blue and black to black. The 2 switches I've got, I'm going to do the driver's side towards the driver's window and the passenger one towards the passenger window. So the black goes to number 2, the blue goes to number 1. Now I've got those that way round because it just gives you a little bit more room that side. The 2 earths go on the outside, and then the live in the middle switch. So the other switch gives you the wiring as being black and blue. Considering these are both blue, I'm going to treat the light blue as blue and the dark blue as the black one. So the dark black one goes to number 2, the light blue number 2, the 2 earths either side, and the live in the middle. So and that should be 2 working switches. Let's switch the ignition on. No fuse pop, and let's see whether this window goes up and down. That's the wrong way round. Straight away, that's the wrong way round to the configuration. So I've only followed the instructions there and I've got no idea what's wrong. So when you should be opening it, you should be pushing down. That's going the opposite way. So the easy way to fix that is swap over the blue and the black. Open and close. Good. So I'm going to guess this side doesn't do the other door the right way around either. It's not switched, so I'm going to go and do the switch on that side. And the main reason that the driver side one did not work was because this switch wasn't fixed. Now you're thinking, why doesn't that work? Because that's a changeover switch that side, and this is a changeover switch. So the way that it's wired internally as well makes a difference to what power goes onto these 2. Bit complicated, but it's basically using that as part of the circuit, and I think that's the right way to do it. Now this side's a little bit different, whereas the live definitely get, and I've done the same thing here, that I've fitted that. So let's take that out. So the live is definitely to the middle one, which is number 4. The 2 wires that go down to the motor again go on 1 and 2. So straight away I'm going to swap those around to see if it works the right way round. Ignition on. Wrong way as well. So down, up. That's amazing. At least it works. All I've got to do is try it on the other side, see if it sends it the right way up and down. Brilliant. All we've got to do is finish it all off now. Around into the holder, clip, and then fit it in there, one side first, and then clip, and that looks quite fairly factory. That looks all right. I've seen far worse. So again, on this side, remember which side's got the local motor too, because it's got the slightly different coloured wires. Put that on the outside one. And then in she goes, click, fairly factory looking. Why does that not feel right? Let's pull that out. Now I know I said I was going to give you a top tip at the end. I lied. I'm going to give you 2 top tips because I've just found another one. So where I've fitted this, it's too close to that side. The bottom of the wiring is just hitting the edge of the skin, and it's pushing the switch over to one side, and it's sort of dislodging the top bit, so it doesn't feel right. And that's only after I've put it all the way home. So top tip number 1, the other one's going to be right at the very end, is put this as far over to this side as possible. That's probably why you see some kits have got the 2 buttons laid forwards and backwards along here, just to allow for that issue. So what I'm going to do is take the door pad back off, and I'm just going to change the metal ever so slightly with my favourite tool. So it's about here, because I started knocking it down but then realised it needs to go in. So just going to knock it in there. So I've dented that in a lot more probably than I should have, all for the sake of a couple of mil coming over this side. So I'm going to cover it with a good quality primer. So top tip 1, try and get that as close to there as possible. All it would have took was a couple of mil, and that would have been perfect, and I wouldn't have had to do anything there. I'll just run through the screws. So you've got a screw there. You've got one going down there. These bits clip out. There's a screw there, there, there. That holds up various bits of the trim. And if we go over to this side, that more or less just clips out with the screw all the way down there, round by the passenger footwell. And that's going to take us to our top tip, how to keep those runners a little bit better than they should be. So this tip was given to me absolutely years ago, and it's a case of putting the good old fashioned fairy liquid down the runners, and it gives you 2 benefits. One, that acts as a lubricant, and the second one is when it rains, it helps wash away all those little bits of dust that's built in, because that's normally what the issue is. So I'm going to get it in there with the windows down. Now you can get special lubricants and stuff which is like a silicone base, but to be honest I've never found one that works as well. But remember to do that side and that side. That side's a little bit harder to do. Give it time to try and work its own natural path down, both in and out. Just run the window up and down a couple of times. Hopefully you'll hear it sound better. Check out some of the other content, and I'll see you in the next one. And maybe check out this video.